meeting of this month's capsule of the ASGK Grand Rounds. So today we have a short case capsule to be presented by Pidambaran to start off the meeting, followed by case discussion, which will be presented from the Lakeshore Group to be moderated by Dr. Manoj Jacob. So we'll start off with Pidambaran.
So should I formally invite Pidambaran, or Pidambaran can start?
No, Pidambaran will start. You can take over once after that you can take over.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just showing one picture and one video. This is a 56-year-old male. You can see the picture. Now, next slide. This is the video. And after the video, you can you want to see the video once again? So you can send the answers as a personal chat message to me.
You expect the diagnosis?
Yeah, diagnosis. Want to see the picture again? This is the picture. Send as a personal chat message. I think I'll hand over the mic to Dr. Manoj Jacob.
Okay. So it's a great honor for me. So you all invited me, and I am happy to see you all. And without any further discussions or any introductions, I am inviting Dr. Utkarsh Shah, right? He's for presenting a duodenal obstruction, he's expecting something that is unexpected in our day-to-day practice. Shall I invite Utkarsh, please?
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity to present myself on this ASGK platform. So I hope everyone everyone can see my screen. So
Yes.
A rare case of duodenal obstruction. I'm Dr. Utkarsh, DNB trainee at Department of Surgical Gastroenterology in Lakeshore Hospital. So the brief history of the patient when he came to us was he was a 28-year-old male with recurrent episodes of abdominal pain and vomiting. He was a known case of patient gave the history that he is a known case of recurrent acute pancreatitis since September 2020. He never had any addiction, alcohol, tobacco, chewing or smoking. He lost 30 kg of weight in 1 year, and there was no melena or any foul smelling stool. Patient didn't have any comorbidity. He didn't have hypoparathyroidism, dyslipidemia, hypercalcemia, or similar attacks of pain in the childhood. He gave a history of multiple interventions, which we'll see it later on for pancreatitis sequelae since September 2020. So, what was the series of all the events? So first episode, which started in September 2020, patient came with severe abdominal pain with nausea and vomiting, and the working diagnosis was idiopathic or tropical calcific pancreatitis. The CT abdomen was taken, and the CT showed moderate inflammation with fat stranding and focal fluid collection near the body of pancreas. The patient's vitals were stable, and he was well preserved, so he was managed conservatively with IV fluids, antibiotic, and that was a 4 to 5 days of admission. Patient had another episode in October first week with acute abdomen pain and fever. This time there was no nausea, vomiting. On evaluation, he was found to be having overwhelming sepsis. The CT was repeated 3 weeks after the first CT, which showed peripancreatic collection with necrosis, paracolic gutter collection, which was likely ruptured and infected. There was a pseudocyst with necrosis within. There was a pancreaticopleural fistula with left pleural effusion. So the patient, so the surgeon advised patient, and patient underwent upfront laparoscopic necrosectomy, which was done twice, and video assisted thoracoscopic surgery was also done. As the patient was in sepsis and dyspnea was there, they did the PETs. So intraop, there was a peripancreatic necrosis. They did the lavage and did some necrosectomy. That history was given by patient, and 2 drains were placed. One on the right side in the right pararenal space, and another and left side was placed anterior to the pancreas. The patient had prolonged ICU admission with 3 to 4 weeks of hospital stay, but he was still febrile. He was never afebrile after the laparoscopic necrosectomy as well. So with these continuous fever spikes, the patient was referred to further center, where in view of fever, they repeated the CT to look for the collection, which showed a retrogastric collection with the necrotic material within. We'll see the video of that necrotic material in the next slide. So there was a collection here between the stomach and the spleen. The pancreas was bulky with peripancreatic fat stranding, and another feature was the previously kept drain during that laparoscopic necrosectomy was not draining the existing cavity. So it was so prudent to do endoscopic cystogastrostomy. The endoscopist at the second center did the endoscopic cystogastrostomy with a lumen opposing metallic stent. Here we can see the endoscopic cystogastrostomy, and then the endoscopic necrosectomy was contemplated. First was done on 31st of October, and the second sitting was done in the 3rd of the November. And as CT showed that patient had empyema in the left pleural cavity, a cardiothoracic surgeon was opinion was taken, and he underwent left pleural decortication as well. After the endoscopic cystogastrostomy, there was a multiple prongs-like appearance within the cavity. It was almost like a starfish appearance, where there were multiple prongs of the cavity because of the thick septations within the pseudocyst. So after the second necrosectomy, the abdominal drain tubes which were placed during the laparoscopic necrosectomy were removed as there was nil output. And patient was advised to undergo OGD later in the November to replace the lamps with the plastic stent. But the twist in the tail came when he underwent the OGD scopy, which showed D2 narrowing. D1 and supraambulary portion of the D2 was dilated. The scope was negotiated with the difficulty. So it showed a possible duodenal narrowing or some obstruction at the D2 level. This was the picture after the endoscopy where they replaced the lamp stent with the plastic stent. So in December 2020, again, he had an episode of pancreatitis with nausea and vomiting, and there was no fever and jaundice. So what to do next with this episode of necrotizing pancreatitis along with the gastric outlet obstruction features? So far we didn't have the ductal anatomy. So they went ahead with the MRCP, which showed the few peripancreatic small collection with residual 2 by 2 centimeter collection in the tail of the pancreas. Here we can see the nice normal pancreatic duct without any filling defect or dilatation. The diameter of the MPD was mentioned 2.5 mm. There was no stricture or calculi within that, but there is a small, here we can see a small ductular tract which is coursing the duodenum. This is the hyperintense content of the duodenum, over which there is a small duct which is traversing and meeting the probably the pancreatic duct in the MRCP image. So with this annular pancreas finding and the possibility of the gastric outlet obstruction, a surgeon 2 opinion was sought in the same center, who advised bypass for the annular pancreas, and the endoscopist suggested ERCP and sphincterotomy for the patient. So far in this admission, the obstructive symptoms improved and patient tolerated semi-solid to normal diet. So surgeon 2 advised to review the patient after 2 weeks, and he was discharged. In January 2020, the ERCP was contemplated, and the ERCP showed a normal pancreatic duct with the ansa pancreatica. There was no ductal dilatation of the pancreatic duct, or there was no filling defect. The sphincterotomy was done, pancreatic stent was placed, and it was removed after 2 days on 21st of January. This was the ERCP pancreatogram, which is showing normal pancreatic duct, and this white arrow is showing the nice curvilinear ansa pancreatica variation of the pancreatic ducts. As the patient was going to be offered bypass surgery, they wanted to rule out inert motility issues with the stomach wall. So the patient underwent a gastric scintigraphy study, which didn't show any motility issues with the stomach. So, but during this meantime, patient never had gastric outlet obstruction, but he kept on having recurrent pancreatitis episodes. The CECT was done in the April 1st week, which did not show any collection except for the fat stranding and the bulky gland. Always patient manage conservatively with the 2 to 3 days of admission, IV fluids, and opioid analgesia. So in 2021 July, again patient had a pancreatitis, but this time with gastric outlet obstruction. So patient referred to our center. So as the CT was done in January. So as the CT was done in April 1st week, we repeated the CT. Unfortunately, I'm not able to hyperlink that file, but our CT showed complete annular pancreas. The head of the pancreas was bulky, and there was a small peripancreatic collection with peripancreatic fat stranding. There was an irregular dilatation of the main pancreatic duct with 4 mm diameter, and there was a small calculi in the proximal part of the duct, probably in the head or the uncinate process. The stomach and the D1 segment of the duodenum was distended with food material with narrowing seen at the level of annular head of the pancreas. However, with the trickle, so there was a partial gastric outlet obstruction. There was no significant intra-abdominal collections. So after this CT, we had multiple issues. The patient with annular pancreas and recurrent acute pancreatitis, the patient with gastric outlet obstruction, and the developing chronic pancreatitis. So which should we address first? So the team conclude that as the patient is having a gastric outlet obstruction as a main symptom, we thought that we should offer him bypass surgery. So we went ahead with the laparotomy and duodenostomy. The intra findings were encircled pancreatic tissue around the second part of the duodenum, which was causing D2 obstruction and the proximal dilatation of the duodenum. Minimal necrotic collection in the lesser sac. The pancreas was soft and there was no peripancreatic inflammation. So why I have mentioned this picture here, because the data suggests that duodenostomy is very difficult in patients, in adult patients compared to children, because the duodenum will be very mobile with minimal retroperitoneal attachment in the children. But this was not the same in this case. As this big fat belly is hanging just below the annulus, we could nicely oppose this dilated portion to the normal part of the duodenum. Here is a small video of our duodenostomy. So this is the posterior layer which is being sutured. Once the posterior layer was sutured, a longitudinal enterotomy was placed on both the sides, and the second layer is being started. And this is the third layer, over which there was a seromuscular layer. So post-operative period was uneventful. We added feeding jejunostomy to the duodenal-duodenostomy because the patient might have gastric stasis because of the prolonged gastric outlet obstruction, as well as patient had repeated episodes of acute pancreatitis. So suture line may be at risk because of the inflammation. After the surgery, patient is doing good till today. He is tolerating solid diet. His review is due on 6th of September. So the critics for this case for me were whether the upfront laparoscopic necrosectomy and VETS was appropriate, because there was an article by PGI Chandigarh by Dr. Rajesh Gupta and group, where they have mentioned a pre-drainage and post-drainage model nomograms to predict the outcome of the percutaneous drainage failure in infected pancreatic and peripancreatic necrotic collections. In pre-drainage model, they have considered Apache 2 score at admission, necrosis in imaging, whether it is more than 50% of the parenchyma involvement, and the early end organ failure. Whereas in post-drainage model, in addition to these three features, they have added infected collection and the sepsis reversal within 7 days of the first PCD. The other three critics are, was the ERCP intervention was reasonable at that particular time, because the pancreatic duct was normal and there was no filling defect in the ERCP or any ductal dilatation. What should be the appropriate time for intervention in patient with gastric outlet obstruction? And should ANSA pancreatica be considered as a cause of recurrent pancreatitis in addition to or apart from annular pancreas, as both these entities are totally different. So here I conclude my case presentation. Can we have a discussion of critics, please?
Thank you, Ulkarsh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, it's a very complex case, it seems, and a lot of information, and it has been here nicely presented. I think the members of the audience should have taken up these questions. But my main query is that, are you more worried about this obstruction element or the recurrent pancreatitis element? So what are your plan to treat the pancreatitis, to prevent pancreatitis? Is it the annular pancreas is causing pancreatitis, or I think something like ABPDJ, because I'm talking from my old memory, anomalous, something like anomalous pancreatic duct junction or something like that?
So, sir, I have gone through one literature which was published in 2019 in Gastroenterology Endoscopy Journal, where they have said that annular pancreas with abnormal pancreaticoduodenal and biliary junction association can be there, but most of the patient will be in the age of infancy or a very early age of the life. There is only a handful of cases, hardly 2 or 3 cases, which have been published where they have found a coexistence of ABPDJ with the annular pancreas.
But this patient's main symptom is recurrent pancreatitis, right? Because he's present at least 3 times, or it could be a persisting collections or necrosis that might have caused labeled as recurrent pancreatitis.
Sir, maybe reasons being the annular duct may be opening into the CBD. We don't have a clear cut the course of the pancreatic duct where it is actually opening, whether it is opening in the CBD or whether there is associated pancreatic divisum. But in ERCP, sir, there was an finding of ansa pancreatica, which can also be considered. There is a robust data which is suggestive of independent risk factor of recurrent acute pancreatitis in patient having ansa pancreatica.
So will this patient be amenable to an ERCP now? Because you have done a duodenoscopy, probably my ignorance. Is that easy to do another ERCP in the future?
Very difficult to answer, sir. I don't have.
I think I leave that question to the audience. Shubhalal sir. Hello. Prakash. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So
Prakash, do you think that ERCP is again possible in this case again? Because his main problem is the pancreatitis, recurrent pancreatitis.
yeah, I think the pancreatitis portion is not resolved because in the last imaging, they have mentioned that there is a small calculate in the duct and there is some duct dilatation for the first time. So it's an evolving process and the patient had multiple pancreatitis. So that part is not settled yet. That's what I believe. And doing duodenoscopy should not prevent future ERCPs, I think, because it's a side-to-side type of anastomosis. Still, the ambula should be accessible. That's
I have been wondering whether it could be a duodenojejunectomy or could have been better, like a rule-loop duodenojejunectomy to do the so that you can access the ambula anytime.
Maybe in this particular case, I don't
know.
So the pancreatitis part, probably we need to follow this patient up and see how he progresses. If he has recurrent pancreatitis, it's a difficult problem altogether.
But this is quite complex, is it? Very complex.
Yeah,
It's got two
I think Dr. John from Lakeshore and Dr.
sorry.
Hello,
let us. Yeah.
Prakash. Sir.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I was going through the literature, so I found that they were talking about the cause for the pancreatitis in annular pancreas being the reflux due to the duodenal obstruction, the reflux of the biliary contents into the PD. So correcting the obstruction might resolve the pancreatitis. But already if there is sequelae of pancreatitis due to the stricture of the NPD or anything, then of course that would continue. But otherwise, the duodenal, the relief of the obstruction per se gives relief. And I feel that in most cases of annular pancreas, once the bypass is done, the patients do well. But I have not seen many, so I can't say from my personal experience. But yeah, that's what I feel. Maybe he may not develop recurrent attacks in future. But always there is a possibility, and then we'll have to take it from there.
I think, John, you have done. I think you have done the correct thing. And thing is that, see, whatever is being done, it's for the best for the patient because the numbers are so minimal, and we are all doing for the best for the patient. I think probably in the next future this could be the standard procedure, you know. But I still have a feeling that this concept of ABPDJ, probably I may be obsessed with that. There is something related to this abnormal pancreatoanomaly. This is like a syndrome, you know, because whenever these patients with annular pancreas, they come in like a developmental anomalies. Whenever who has the developmental anomalies, they will be having multiple developmental anomalies. That's a myriad of abnormalities because it's a congenital problem. So there is highly likely that something else is happening, not only the annular pancreas including duodenal obstruction, but we can't do anything differently, as Prakash told. Probably next time if you develop a pancreatitis, probably we need to see what else we can do. I think Prasad wants to ask some question or some more information.
Actually, a very interesting case. I was just thinking why the first surgeon has missed, he was telling tropical pancreatitis, why MRCP is not done at that time, and why they couldn't diagnose an annular pancreas. Second thing, they suspected pancreaticopleural fistula for which decortication was done. I'm just thinking so many procedures already done for this patient. And here again, we have done duodenostomy done. So if the patient has again recurrent pancreatitis, it's a real troublesome. I was just wondering why those surgeons have missed in the first case.
It's a good possibility, but thing is that, you know, there is no anecdote. This is only anecdotal experience about annular pancreas, possibly less than 100, or I don't know, but it's very, very, very limited. But I have a feeling that all these surgical procedures have been explained in the context of pediatric surgery, duodenostomy, and I think pancreatitis has not been a big concern in that age group because they are not old enough to present like pancreatitis. In the adult, possibly rather than duodenal obstruction, possibly recurrent pancreatitis may be the main concern. But we don't know. But still, I think they have done a good job. They have relieved the obstruction. I still feel that they could do an ERCP later and some sort of stenting or something they can do with the pancreatitis. Is there a role for, I don't know because I'm not very updated, is there a role for any pancreatic stenting to prevent recurrent pancreatitis? It helps in pancreas divisum, right? But not in this case. Is ANSA, one second, because I'm not very good in this. I think Dr. HR wants to ask something. HR wants to contribute. Is that right?
Hi, Manoj. How are you?
Hi.
Good evening, friends. And there were a few points which came through in our discussion in our department, but somehow Utkarsh couldn't highlight those points. One of them is that this patient never had overwhelming pancreatitis. He used the word overwhelming sepsis. I don't know what he meant by overwhelming sepsis. There was no organ failure. The patient did not receive organ support. The patients remained in the ICU for several days, but that is not necessarily a true index in any other place other than a National Health Service of the severity of the illness. So I feel that this patient got an overkill as far as the initial treatment was concerned. There are now very clear guidelines of who should get percutaneous drainage. To do it laparoscopically, we all agree that that can produce more dissemination of the infection within the abdomen. We want to take advantage of the localized nature of any infection or collections if present. So we would like to place percutaneous drains in the early phase rather than do laparoscopy. I presume they did a percutaneous drain, but they called it laparoscopy. The patient probably never had a pancreatic pleural fistula, and I agree with Prasad that that was probably based on a slightly high amylase in one of the pleural aspirates. Again, probably a knee-jerk reflex in response in aspirating the pleural cavity, probably introducing infection, creating the empyema. Of course, the lesson that I think we need to take from this case is that if you have multiloculated pleural effusion or empyema, an early decortication can make a huge difference to their recovery, and that helped here. So I would not aspirate these collections unless there was really clear indications. I do not think that this patient has ANSA pancreatica. ANSA pancreatica, the connection is between, it does not go beyond the duodenal wall. Here, because the resolution of a C-arm image is so poor sometimes that you cannot distinguish between an annular pancreas and an ANSA pancreatica. And an ANSA pancreatica is an endoscopist's delight. They really go high on a diagnosis like that. And they like to discuss it for hours, and it doesn't really get the patient anywhere. So I believe that this patient had that fine duct which Dr. Utkarsh showed you was probably the duct in the parenchyma which was going around the duodenum. This was indeed a full annulus, not a partial annulus. So I would not need a gastric scintigraphy. The patient lost 20 kilos, not because he had severe pancreatitis, but because he couldn't eat at all. He wasn't eating. He was just taking only, gruel, and that was it. And no solids at all. And nobody really highlighted that. So he had nutritionally depleted substantially, and that's why the feeding jejunostomy was considered appropriate. However, he recovered so dramatically after the surgery that the FJ became kind of unnecessary. So the nutrition aspect was probably not highlighted again. I again, probably we need to understand that annular pancreas is asymptomatic in 2/3 of patients. In the rest of the third, in children, of course, it presents with, obstruction, but in adults with pancreatitis. And certainly relief of the obstructive component, as John said, would go a long way to ameliorate the pancreatic changes. But as Prakash rightly put it, we have a calculus somewhere, we have some dilatation of the duct. So we can look forward or look, with some concern as to the fact that he may develop symptomatic chronic pancreatitis. And the general guideline seems to be that acute pancreatitis or chronic pancreatitis must be treated on its own merit. It does not matter. The fact that the patient has an annular pancreas simply means an additional duodenal drainage is necessary. That's all. And regarding duodenal duodenostomy, it should not impede a post-operative ERCP at all. And I probably would like to disagree to the suggestion that a DJ would have been better, because this would provide the least blind loop and the best quality of enteral feeding and drainage of the duodenum, because it's absolutely hugging the annulus. And last but not the least, annular pancreas divisum happens in, I think, 1/3 of cases of annular pancreas. And so it's a mixed situation. So all these conditions may coexist, and treat each one on its merit. I think that's the best bet. We have treated several other annular pancreas in the past. Some of them presented with peptic ulceration and acid peptic disease kind of symptoms. One presented with chronic pancreatitis and required a pancreatogenostomy in addition to a duodenal jejunostomy. So I think it's also time probably for us to put our data together. I'm sure others have experience. We should try and pool the resources and see where we get, even if it's the odd case or two. Thank you for your patient hearing.
I think HRS and so tried to answer all the questions that we have raised here. So any other discussions on this aspect? Because as we say, we will wait and watch to see what happens to this patient. And probably, do you have ASGK have a custom to revisit these case capsules later in the future? Like all these patients make a small patient group, and we will discuss again after 1 year to see what is the follow-up for these patients. Is this happening or something like that?
No, we have not ventured into that yet. We actually have video recordings of all the cases presented in this meeting.
But probably in some time we can have an attempt to just revisit all these cases and see what's happened to this patient about the follow-up and other things.
It's a good suggestion. We'll think about it.
Any other thing? I think Ansa has asked a question about this taking down the pancreas to pleural fistula. But usually once it has subsided, usually it heals by itself. Is that right? You don't need to do anything differently. That was one of the chat boxes about the pancreatico pleural fistula and empyema. Possibly that might have been healed by itself once the pancreatitis is resolved. Any other discussions?
I think all those these cases of annular pancreas are extremely rare, and all those who have seen cases of annular pancreas can actually give their suggestions or experiences. I think that would help others also.
True.
Dr. H. Ramesh would have seen more cases of these, as he said, many other cases of annular pancreas also presenting with this pancreatitis. What was the outcome in those patients if they had presented with pancreatitis?
We haven't managed any patient with necrotizing pancreatitis requiring necrosectomy in the old days or other minimally invasive approaches later on. We have one patient with chronic pancreatitis, and I am not certain if that is not a coexistence of two diseases in the same patient, because we do have a population which seems to have a high prevalence of chronic pancreatitis. And this patient had calculi, pancreatic duct dilatation, and an annular pancreas, and surgery was performed during surgery, duodenostomy again was done, and a head coring was done, and the patient did quite well after surgery. So the literature also says that early recognition of the duodenal obstruction would go a long way in contributing to a possible aborting of the pancreatic process. So John has to reiterate John's statement that, and the Prasad's statement that if it had been picked up earlier, it may have been possible to do early drainage and of the duodenum, which may have helped.
As Prasad put in, it is very unusual that in spite of having so many interventions on the pancreas, the imaging did not pick up the annular pancreas in the first surgical unit. That was very surprising.
No, and the CTs and their images, it's gratifying to know that the images that we get out of hospitals in Kerala is vastly superior to that in other metropolitan cities, perhaps, because several CTs were done, none of which seemed to show a dilated proximal duodenum, whereas the only CT we did here, you would have had to schedule the surgery the next day practically, because the duodenum was a mega duodenum. Whether or not the process had advanced by that time, I'm not sure, but the patient had symptoms even earlier when on being questioned. So it wasn't something that appeared all of a sudden. I think somehow, I think pancreatitis is a kind of it's a clarion call for interventionists that they want immediately to do a procedure. They want to do probably some, and often one misses the wood for the trees. That's the only explanation I can give.
But they have done an ERCP, right, before this procedure?
Yeah, the indication for the ERCP is not very clear to me at that time. I would have thought that certainly there was no clear evidence of a ductal disruption producing a collection or anything like that. So what was the aim of doing? They left a pancreatic stent in, which conveniently came out, as you would expect in most pancreatic stents. One doesn't have to remove them because they come out by themselves. That's what I say tongue-in-cheek to my colleagues. So, so that's what happened here as well. And the pancreatic ductogram, I wonder if Dr. Utkarsh was able to obtain a pancreatic ductogram from the endoscopist, Dr. Utkarsh?
Yes, sir. I got the ductogram from the ERCP ductogram from the doctor.
Did you share it with us?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was the picture where you said there was an ansa pancreatica.
Yes, sir.
So I think diagnostic ERCP for any annular pancreas divisum or ansa pancreatica or any suspected pathology must be avoided at the present time. We could have got all that information by a good MRCP, and then of course then tailor treatment to the condition.
Is this Pitambaran wants to ask some question or want to add something more? You raised your hand, right?
Yeah, actually, as Dr. Ramesh sir told, because they had undergone an ERCP and the duodenum was very mega duodenum, and how could they miss a D2 obstruction while doing an ERCP? This is what raises the question. Because
yeah, I think it's a lesson for all of us that I think it happens to surgeons, it happens to endoscopists, that sometimes we must miss the wood for the trees. We have a blinkered approach. We see the pancreatitis, and we never put together. Why did the CT not show you the annulus? The annulus was not a thin fibrotic annulus. It was a thick, fleshy annulus. It was obvious on our CT. It was obvious at surgery. There was no reason why it wouldn't have shown up on previous images. I think it was just not looked for because it is not common.
No, sir. My real doubt was that the ERCP scope is a big scope. So to position that in that second part of duodenum to cannulate with the obstructed duodenum is technically a very difficult thing.
Yeah, I mean, the procedure took a long time.
Anyways, he's a good endoscopist. That's why he has done in a ERCP
Exactly.
efficiently test
Exactly.
ending.
Exactly.
Okay, anyway, it's very complex and nice case. A lot of discussion with obstruction element, pancreatitis, but still it's a lot of uncertainties whether this patient will develop another pancreatitis. And hopefully, as John said, we will all feel or pray for that this reflex will come down and patient won't develop any pancreatitis in the future. Anyone else?
How do you plan to follow up this case? Just
I'm sorry.
clinical follow-up or imaging? What is your plan, the unit plan, Dr. Utkarsh?
Sir, we would like to see the patient along with his nutritional status, and whether he develops any pancreatic dysfunction or he develops diabetes, steatorrhea, or in the fall we would like to repeat the imaging if he develops pain. To look for any mass or ongoing chronic pancreatitis status. And based on that, we have a unit protocol to categorize the patient according to the ABC classification. And based on that, we would like to take a call.
I think from the audience there is a mention about that Dr. Ramsa has mentioned that there is a risk of pancreatic cancer associated with annular pancreas. I don't know how much is evidence because the number of cases of annular pancreas is so small, and probably the literature support may be very less to support that theory. The risk of pancreatic cancer in patients with annular pancreas.
Sir, the risk is there, but the association and causation relationship, according to the data, is yet to be established. But there are two papers which are favoring that the periampullary malignancy risk increases in patient with annular pancreas. And the paper suggests that most common malignancy they have seen is the ampulla first, followed by pancreas, then CBD, and then the neuroendocrine tumor as well. One case of insulinoma they have reported, sir.
Okay.
I have a small presentation of annular pancreas, sir. If you can present it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I think the time is okay, right? Because we have still
Yeah, yeah.
45 minutes. Yeah. Ulkash, you are going to present, right?
Yes, sir. So annular pancreas, which is a very rare congenital abnormality second to the pancreatic divisum, which happens because of the defect in the migration of the ventral bud of the pancreas. The incidence is very difficult to define precisely, but literature says from 5 to 15 per lakh of population. It is associated with the maternal polyhydramnios, chromosomal abnormalities, and intestinal atresias, imperforate anus, and Meckel's diverticulum. What is the actual embryology and pathogenesis is by 7th week, there is a duodenal expansion. Along with the duodenal expansion, the ventral bud rotates behind the duodenum and it gets fused with the dorsal bud and it forms the uncinate process and the part of the pancreas. In this annular pancreas, there is a defect in this migration, which is described with the three theories, which is Laco's theory, Baldwin's theory, and Hill's theory. Laco's theory suggests that there is an adherence of the ventral bud to the duodenal wall prior to rotation, and it stays there even after the rotation and gets hypertrophied, and it encircles the duodenum as the age progresses. In Baldwin's theory, there is a persistent and enlargement of the ventral bud. Whereas in Hill's theory, there is a fusion of the ventral as well as dorsal bud, but there is an enlargement of both the buds and it encircles the duodenum completely. According to the ERCP literature suggests that there are 6 types of the annular drainage of the annular duct in type 1 and type 2, which are most common, where the annular duct runs behind the duodenum and it opens into the main pancreatic duct and it drains into the ampulla. Whereas in type 2, the Wittgenstein duct runs anteriorly to the duodenum, then it courses posteriorly and it opens into the ampulla. Whereas in type 3, the annular duct runs behind the duodenum and it opens into the CBD. Whereas in the type 4, the annular duct runs behind the duodenum and it opens into the CBD, whereas the Wirsung duct opens through the minor papilla, which may be the type of the, in this case, there is a pancreatic divisum. Whereas in type 5 and type 6, the annular duct opens into the Santorini duct. In type 5, there is a presence of main pancreatic duct, whereas here there is a malfusion of the pancreatic ducts. Based on the distribution of the pancreatic parenchyma, there can be complete annular pancreas or there can be incomplete annulus. The incomplete annulus can be anterolateral or in the posterolateral location. Talking about the clinical features, 2/3 are asymptomatic, as Ramesh sir mentioned earlier. The age of presentation is very critical because in child mostly they'll present with the gastrointestinal symptoms and food intolerance, whereas in adult, along with the chronic abdominal pain, there will be plethora of symptoms of GI gastric outlet obstruction or pancreatitis, or in remote cases the jaundice because of the biliary obstruction. There was a paper by Zyromsky, which was presented in Journal of American College of Surgeons in 2008, where they mentioned that adults who present with annular pancreas, 75% of the patient presented with abdominal pain, 24% had GI symptoms, 22% presented with the pancreatitis, 11% of the patient presented with the jaundice. How to approach in patients with annular pancreas. In infants, abdomen X-ray will show classic double bubble sign, but it is not the diagnostic for the annular pancreas because it can be seen in the other conditions like intestinal atresias. Most of the child get diagnosed during the laparotomy after these obstructive features. In CT scan, there can be descending duodenal narrowing. The ring of pancreatic tissue, as we discussed, can be complete or incomplete. And a paper by Chandrasekharan et al. In 2009 showed that pancreatic tissue posterolateral to the second part of the duodenum has a high sensitivity of 92% and sensitivity of 100%. Based on CT, the annular pancreas can be diagnosed as a type 1 if the pancreatic tissue is ankling up to half of the duodenum. Type 2, where the leaf of the pancreatic tissue encircles the anterolateral part. In type 3, it encircles the posterolateral part. In type 4, there is a crocodile jaw kind of opening, where the two jaws of the pancreatic tissue in between the duodenum, and the last one is the complete annulus pancreas. In this CT, we can see the duodenum and the nice complete encirclement of the duodenum by the pancreatic tissue. Talking about pancreatogram, either ERCP or MRCP, is a nice duct which is seen, which is coursing over the duodenum and joining the pancreatic duct. Here also we can see the course of the annular pancreatic duct over the duodenum. Whether to do ERCP or MRCP should be based on the motif. If the motif is only diagnostic, then MRCP is preferred. Otherwise, ERCP can be considered. How accurate ERCP or MRCP, still there is a very few cases available in the data. The available data showed ERCP only 47% of the patient diagnosed the annular pancreas, whereas MRCP only 16% annular duct was seen, which was presented again by the Zyromsky in Journal of the American College of Surgeons in 2008. Then what about the annular pancreas and pancreas divisum? Do they coexist? So in 36% of the patient in Chandrasekharan et al. Study had coexistent annular pancreas and pancreatic divisum. Zyromsky et al. Also showed that 29% were diagnosed with pancreatic divisum, those who had annular pancreas as well. So the data suggested that The pancreatic pancreas divisum occurs more often in the presence of annular pancreas than it is observed in the general population. Annular pancreas and acute pancreatitis, mostly because of the obstructive pancreatitis, inadequate drainage from the duct, usually involves the annulus and the adjacent parenchyma. The presentation was 37% in the quoted studies who had annular pancreas with recurrent acute pancreatitis. Annular pancreas and chronic pancreatitis, nearly 1/3 of the patient, 32% of the patient had ERCP findings suggestive of chronic pancreatitis. Etiology was probably because of the obstruction, maybe because of the mechanical or functional sphincter of Oddi dysfunction or pancreas divisum. Chronic pancreatitis incidence was more in patients with annular pancreas and coexistence of the pancreatic divisum compared to those patients with annular pancreas alone. Annular pancreas and malignancy, as we already discussed, that periampullary malignancy incidence is higher in patient with annular pancreas than general population. The ampullary carcinoma was very common. The Zyromsky et al. Detected neoplasia, some neoplasia in 32% of the adults, out of which 23.9% of the patient had pancreaticobiliary type of neoplasia. But the association has yet to be determined. And a brief detail about ansa pancreatica and annular pancreas, whether the ansa pancreatica is a type of annular pancreas duct. So the basics of ansa pancreatica is it joins the main pancreatic duct at an oblique angle. Usually other ducts, other side branches joins the MPD at right angle. So the area served by the ANSA has a poor drainage, and triggers like alcoholism, mechanical or functional stenosis of the sphincter will further cause further impairment of the drainage. And result in pancreatitis. This is the ERCP finding, which is showing the annular pancreas duct, where the duct is descending and then it is arching over and ascending, and it is entering into the minor papilla. So what is the actual difference in the annular duct and the ANSA duct? The critical factor is that the duct has to traverse the duodenum in the annular pancreas, whereas in ANSA pancreatica, the duct after its origin will terminate near the minor papilla. Annular pancreas and abnormal pancreaticobiliary duodenal junction, very rare existence, mostly in children, and 11 out of 12 patients were children in the quoted study. Treatment, there is no specific guideline for the treatment. It should be based on the symptom of the patients. Patients with necrotizing pancreatitis, definitely a step-up approach. And the surgical procedure of choice in adult is duodenojejunectomy or gastrojejunectomy, but it should be it should be based on the intra-op condition, where we could be able to do a duodenectomy. And in neonates, definitely duodenectomy is preferred. And the data denounces the Whipple's resection as an option, but it has to be on the card in patient where the patient present with obstructive jaundice due to chronic pancreatitis and periampullary lesions, which is suspicious for the neoplasm. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. My mentor, Dr. H. Ramesh, and Dr. John for guiding me for my presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulkarsh. And Dr. John, you want to add upon anything about this? Any particular things you want to add upon other than Ulkarsh and HR has mentioned?
Dr. Ramesh has mentioned almost everything that, so I have nothing further to add.
So in this case, there is no pancreas divisum, right? It is just an annular duct in the ERCP or MRCP.
Yes, there's no evidence of pancreatic divisum in all of the images about any accessory duct and minor papilla opening. There's no such mention of anything. So Probably this has only annular pancreas.
Annular pancreas. Okay. Is it Pidambar has mentioned about Dr. Vishnu from Global Chennai is also been here in this audience? From anyone from Chennai? No. Okay. I think we have reached a stage that we have discussed. I think it was a good discussion. If anyone doesn't want to add anything, we can wind up the session. I think there's a quiz surprise, is it? Some gift? Pidambaran.
Yeah, thank you. I'll show the answer of the quiz, and there are 2 persons who had correctly mentioned the answer. The first answer was given by Dr. Shashikiran, and the answer was given by Dr. Pramil.
Dr.
Pramil.
Pramil is always like that. He always gets prizes.
So I'm just showing
What
the
is the answer?
This is post-herpetic pseudo-hernia, or called phantom hernia. Actually, due to herpes zoster, because you can see the initial photo, this is the patch of the herpes zoster, and there is ipsilateral weakness of this muscle due to the herpes zoster, and this causes phantom hernia. So actually, there is no definite hernia which usually recovers by itself. So in our hospital itself, there was a big conflict between the surgeon and the radiologist. Surgeon told that there is a hernia, and the radiologist told that there is no hernia and it's absolutely normal. So clinically, it was looking like hernia, but there was no actual hernia. It's a pseudo hernia, or called a phantom hernia.
So rare, is it? Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah. So there is no neurological weakness, nothing, no muscle weakness. It just happens on one side, asymmetrical.
Yeah, asymmetrical.
So why it happens only on that affected side?
No, the muscle weakness will be there.
Muscle weakness is there.
Muscle weakness
From the
is there.
neurological involvement.
Yeah, there is no actual herniation, or there is no actual defect.
But Pidambaran, this is a case where the herpes has resolved. No, but he still seems, is it vesicles that he still has, or is it a healed hernia? The herpes zoster has.
Herpes zoster has resolved. The neurologic effect was still persisting.
Okay.
And this is long-standing, or you said that is self-limiting? It is satisfied.
Yeah, self-limiting. Usually, it will recover by itself. You don't need to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Almost 80% recover spontaneously.
Okay. I think now we need to ask for any groin hernias, inguinal hernias. We need to ask the patient, you got any herpes in the past?
Herpes zoster comes only in that dermatome, only in the inside.
Okay, nice one. So what's the price for this quiz?
Prize will be given by the secretary, Dr. Ramendran.
Okay, hi Ramendran.
Ramendran is there?
Yeah, he's smiling. He's got some money in his pocket.
So, shall we wind up today's meeting with a vote of thanks from Dr. Ramendran?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
Ramendran,
sure.
you can wind up the meeting with a vote of thanks.
Yeah. So, sorry, I was a bit late. I missed the early part of the presentation, but we had a very rare and interesting case for discussion today. So it's almost 1 year since we have started this program. The monthly ASGK program we started during the end of last year. Presented and discussed the case very well. Thank you for that extra piece of presentation on annular pancreas. Thank you, Lakeshore team, particularly Dr. John and HR sir for the prompt guidance and managing this patient. And we are so lucky to get Dr. Manoj as our today's moderator. Thank you so much, Manoj, for accepting the invitation. We had a fantastic discussion today. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you, Pidambaran. You are the main person, one and only person behind all these shows. And thank you for that very interesting quiz. First time I'm hearing about this. What is it? Pseudo hernia.
Pseudo hernia or phantom
Am I
hernia.
audible?
Yeah.
Phantom hernia. Okay. But it's not discussed in any of the textbooks. Am I right?
I don't know whether it is discussed in textbooks, but because since I saw this, saw the patient, I was also convinced
it's
that
very
there was,
interesting. Yeah.
I was also convinced that there is a hernia. Then I went back to the CT console, looked at the CT, and just sure that there is no hernia. Then I looked up into the literature and found that this is the pseudo hernia.
Okay, very, very interesting. So we'll meet again next month with another interesting case. Till then, goodbye, good night. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
We'll wind up.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.